Great. Welcome, everybody. Aloha. And on behalf of Chief Information Security Officer Doug Murdoch, welcome to the second workshop of the year for the Hawaii Annual Code Challenge. My name is Vince Hoang, and I am the Chief Information Security Officer for the Office of Enterprise Technology Services, State CISO for short. ETS is the organization that's been coordinating the HACC Challenge for the past 5 years. In today's workshop, the second of many, today's workshop is the second of many we have planned for this annual hackathon. For further information, go to hacc.hawaii.gov for information on the workshops and the HACC. Right. Given these unprecedented times that we live in today, what we normally have been a live workshop for everybody to physically attend has been switched over to virtual. All right. Let's see if I can switch my screen. All right. And here's an overview on the agenda. For everyone's awareness, this workshop is being recorded, and the presentation slides will be available after the presentation is over. Right. First off, I'll present an overview of the state's cybersecurity strategy and how that aligns with the HACC program. And we'll provide some Q&A, and then I hand it off to the second presenter, Cort Chambers. So big picture here is our state cybersecurity team. The picture here is from our annual Cybersecurity Awareness Month to depict some of the team members of the state. Our goal is to protect the state infrastructure and its data. A large strategic objective is to provide cost-effective solutions by leveraging state staff rather than consultants. All right, so here's kind of the connection point, the definition of hacker. In the mainstream media, most people think as a hacker as somebody that's sitting in a dark room with a hoodie and tippity-tapping a keyboard. If you see some of the memes, they have 3 hands. I don't exactly know why they're tapping away at the keyboard. But in my parlance, there's a combination of hacker from the programmatic perspective and someone who's just a large enthusiast. So according to the jargon file, I'm not sure who on the call is familiar with that. It defines a hacker as someone who loves to explore technology, and they want to push those technologies to the far extremes as possible, purely because of an innate curiosity. I like the item 2 with those keywords there. Not only are folks enthusiastic about technology or programming and coding for the fun of it, but it gets to the point where it can be obsessive as well. So hopefully folks on this briefing today have a lot of that energy to be able to, with the love of programming and technologies, to be able to, where you yourself feel that you are a hacker. Right. So on the cybersecurity side, one of the key strategies we have is aligning towards what's known as the cybersecurity framework. This is from NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technologies. From the state perspective, this is leveraged as a risk management framework to help provide in simple terms the overall risks of the state from a cybersecurity perspective. When we take those risks, we divide it into 5 different functions. So if you look on this chart here, it's identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And as far as the tiers go, it functions a little bit like a maturity model, where this helps prioritize where the resources need to go, whether it be time, money, or staff, to be able to have a good level set of where we are with respect to the risk framework. So it's not about trying to get to level 4 on all the functions, because it's very time intensive and very cost prohibitive, but it's being more strategic. So based on the infrastructure or the data that we're trying to protect, we want to have ebbs and flows of more energy, more resources towards securing the infrastructure, and then in areas where we don't need as much information, we can dial back the emphasis and prioritize the resources that way. Key examples are like our tax data. That's very, very important. So we need to put a lot of energy into protecting and securing that. Whereas our public-facing websites, if they get compromised, it's very embarrassing, but it's not resulting in any sort of data breach. Okay. So from that big picture of the risk management framework, this is a framework that's very near and dear to my heart, and that is the CIS controls. This is maintained by the Center for Internet Security, and the reason why it is, I like it so much is because it's very, very practical. From the risk side, it's good to speak using something like the CSF to convey in the business sense of conveying what risk is to the organization. However, when you have to prioritize budget towards actual technical controls, the systems, antivirus, firewalls, um, following this model is extremely pragmatic. And if you look at this top 20, I'm not sure how well that presents on your screen, but organizationally, a lot of folks when they come in, a consultant would want to do an assessment first, and then do a penetration test of sort to kind of get a lay of the land of where I highlight all the risks are. In most cases, that very, very expensive review results in prioritizing a lot of energy towards, when you look at this model, the basic controls, where we have proper asset management from the software and hardware perspective, maintaining good vulnerability management, restricting your controls. If you look, for example, if you're paying attention to the public popular press, a lot of the breaches you see are a result of public-facing websites where data wasn't supposed to be there. An example here with this world of the cloud is it's like Amazon S3 buckets, for example, where here's some data and it's presented in a very programmatic, easy to access way, but someone made a mistake somewhere where it was public accessible. Another example of common data leaks or breaches that fall on what I define as fundamental controls are like Elasticsearch databases, when you're pulling in all the sorts of data for a very quick and agile analysis, but for some reason it wasn't logged down and it's publicly exposed through a web server somewhere. And so we have bots that are scanning the entire internet that are looking, some good guys, some bad guys, but it's a bit of a race because when software becomes so easy to enable and turn on, we need to get those fundamentals done. Otherwise, mistakes happen and it result in a breach. Right. Here's a kind of a very, very simple diagram pictorial describing where we want to put our energy. So in the past, before we had public clouds, a lot of the infrastructure was, a lot of the energies for security controls were prioritized towards the network. Mostly because on the state side, we were pretty much very, very decentralized. And so from a central authority, we have the strongest ROI by putting in network security controls, firewalls, intrusion detection systems, data loss prevention systems, for example. And that way, as long as it's like a sieve where the data comes in, goes from on-premise out to the cloud and back, we use a gateway to provide that mechanism of control so that if something's not supposed to go past that gate, then it gets stopped. Things have really, really changed in the past 5 years because our internet world has moved towards, by default, encrypted. Almost all of our traffic, 80% plus of our traffic going on the internet is encrypted today. And since so much of that is online and so much of it is encrypted, it's very, very hard for these network tools to provide the proper controls. So then now we have to move those controls towards the endpoint and towards our public clouds where a lot of the data is moving. So the concept there is moving our controls closer to where the user is, the interaction, or towards where the data is sitting, and have less reliance on the network controls. So it's not like we're throwing away the firewalls per se, but the emphasis of the control of visibility should be prioritized towards where the data resides or where the user is. All right. Next phase. Okay, so now this is a example depicting of where the security controls need to be. A lot of folks are afraid of the 0-day or of advanced actors taking control and, say, impacting us with ransomware, for example. But if you look, breach after breach after breach, the large majority of these impacts is because there's some failure of a basic control. whether we don't have, if you don't have proper inventory management and a system or server is exposed to the internet, we're not updating or patching on a regular basis, it tends to fall back on being very, very consistent and very rigorous on having these basic controls in mind, right? And this slide emphasizes that even straight from the NSA. This was a presentation from 2018, from the NSA. When they presented at RSA conference, they said in the 2 years from that presentation, most of the effort was looking for unpatched systems, and it was less about the focus on the 0-day. Okay. Now, as our infrastructure starts moving more towards the cloud, this is a way of visualizing where our ability to manage this data versus a provider's ability to do so. In the past, everything was on premises. We have our mainframes, we have our physical servers, so we own the entire stack. But as we virtualize and move more information towards the cloud, we're slow stepping through infrastructure as a service. The lower layers are managed by a provider, and then our ability to focus and prioritize and lock things down are in the upper tiers. As we move towards the platform as a service, even less. It's less with the infrastructure that we need to be concerned about and be worried about, and it's mostly focused on the ability of locking down the applications. And then if we've outsourced everything, all the technologies, which is essentially a customer, we have a SaaS model. And at the end of the day, it really falls back on the identity. Are you who you claim you are, and do you have the right access and permissions to access the application and be able to access that data? Right. Right. Another view as far as where the priorities need to be is with this pictorial here. This is referred to as a sliding scale of cybersecurity, and it's emphasizing having a really, really robust architecture. The reason why we want to do that is because it costs less for that investment, and it provides a stronger value. As the team gets stronger and more rigorous, then once we have good breadth of the architecture, we can step up to passive defense like intrusion detection systems, or active defense where we're leveraging our federal partners to look for advanced actors there. But what we're trying to convey here is that as an organization, we should not put an overemphasis on detecting and finding and stopping the EBT, our advanced actors, because much like them, if they're trying to attack us on our infrastructure, why would they spend a lot of energy and money on something where it doesn't really take that much effort in the first place? So if we have an organization that's not very, very mature, we're not patching very, very often, we don't need to drop. If the bad actor does not need to invest in a 0-day, which is rather expensive, and it just focus on very, very poor software hygiene where they're not being updated on a regular basis. All right, and then I think this is my last slide I want to present to you, is trying to dovetail it back to the HACC program here, because the participants in this program, you're going to be writing applications that hopefully will help support state managed data and its applications. Once we're getting through those hurdles of the infrastructure piece, this is where we need to focus our energy here. OWASP is a nonprofit organization that focuses highly on application security. So if you are building an application, for example, a good hit list to go through to understand your environment is this OWASP Top 10. OWASP is short for the Open Web Application Security Program. And so if you look here, it's really the same technical controls top 10 that's been over time, and it's really more the priorities that have changed. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, databases weren't locked down very well. So SQL injection was a very, very popular mechanism to breach data. Whereas now, where we're using software programs, or programming language that start baking in more the security, then it becomes less of an issue. So rather than say query SQL directly, we use something like parameterized queries to help isolate potential issues from happening. All right, and let's see where we're at right now. Okay, so we're at about 20 minutes after the hour. I'll leave this open for a few minutes for any questions from the audience. All right. I guess I'll just wait another minute to see if any questions that are popping up in the chat.
So I'm not seeing any questions, but if you have questions, please put them in the chat group and we'll funnel them to Vince later. That way, what we can do is put more time at the end for questions. Vince, you're going to be hanging around, right?
Yes, I'll be around later. Yeah, after Cort's done with his portion, I'll be available for any questions that folks may have at that time.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. That was great.
Great, thank you. All right, now first to hand it off. We're really fortunate to have Dr. Cort Chambers available to present the next session. He is part of our States Fusion Center. That organization helps provide intel analysis and federal products to help promote situational awareness regarding cybersecurity threats. Right, for his section, he'll be providing information regarding how to address security threats, attacks, and vulnerabilities within your network and the cloud. All right, and what else? And again, to close out, as a reminder, the session is recorded and the materials will be available via email. All right, thank you.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Cort Chambers. I'm very happy to be here today, and I just wanted to I hope everyone is having a great week and looking forward to a good holiday weekend. All right, I'll go ahead and share my screen, and we'll make sure we can see that. All right. Just let me know if you folks can see this. All right.
Looks good.
Okay, looks good. All right, I'll go ahead and get started. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start from the beginning and the principles of cybersecurity, attackers and their tools, and then we'll work up through network security. I thought I would just go into an overview and give you guys a lot of good information on attackers and their tools. This is information that we teach at PCATT, and I think it will be beneficial just for a really good overview. So in this presentation, we're going to investigate threat, vulnerability, and risk. Threat is a potential danger to an asset such as data or a network, and a vulnerability is a weakness to a system or its design that could be exploited. An attack surface describes different points where an attacker could get into a system and cause damage. An example is an operating system without security patches. An exploit is a mechanism used to leverage a vulnerability to compromise an asset. A remote exploit works over the internet, and a local exploit is when a threat actor or user has administrative access to the system. And finally, risk is the likelihood that a threat will employ a vulnerability of an asset and result in an undesirable consequence to your system. So what exactly are hackers? A hacker versus a threat actor. White hackers are ethical hackers who use their programming skills for good, ethical, and legal purposes. They perform penetration tests to discover vulnerabilities and work with the developers to address cyber threats throughout the system. Gray hat hackers, on the other hand, commit crimes and do unethical things, but not typically for personal gain or to cause damage. Often they're hacktivists. Basically, they're trying to make a stand for a cause online. And then we have black hat hackers. These are the unethical criminals who violate security for personal gain or for malicious reasons. These are, and they attack networks. And it's important to note that threat actors is a term that's used to describe gray and black hat hackers. The evolution of threat actors. Script kiddies began back in the 1980s, and these were inexperienced hackers running existing tools and exploits to cause harm, but typically not for profit. State-sponsored hackers, on the other hand, are white or black hats who steal government secrets, gather intelligence, and sabotage networks. Their targets are typically foreign governments, terrorist groups, and corporations. Cyber criminals are black hat threat actors that steal billions of dollars from consumers across the globe. And hacktivists, these are the gray hats who rally and protest against political and social ideas. They post articles and videos to leak sensitive information and sometimes deface websites. WikiLeaks is an example of a hacktivist. And then finally, vulnerability brokers. These individuals discover exploits and report them to the vendors, sometimes for prizes or rewards. Cybersecurity task. How do we protect against attacks? Well, we develop good cybersecurity awareness. We report cybercrime to authorities. We must be aware of potential threats in email and on the web and guard important information from threats. And we must take action to protect our assets, users, and customers. We must develop cybersecurity tasks and implement those tasks on a recurring basis. So this is an introduction to attack tools. Attackers use tools to exploit a vulnerability. Sophistication of attack tools and technical knowledge to conduct attacks has changed since 1985. If you'll look on the left side of your screen, the sophistication of attack tools in 1985 was very low, and the technical knowledge of the attackers was very high. You had software engineers and other IT professionals that were building these attack tools. Currently, in the modern age, the sophistication of attack tools is very high, with tools like TrickBot and Emotet and Riot ransomware. And the technical knowledge of the attacker is not that high. Actually, it's very low. What happens is individuals can go onto the dark web now, and they can rent or they can purchase very sophisticated attack tools to launch against their targets. Categories of attacks. What are the common categories of attacks? Well, there's eavesdropping, which is essentially captures and listens to network traffic. Data modification. This alters the captured data in a packet in the data stream without the knowledge of the sender or the receiver. And just for your knowledge, a network packet is a formatted unit of data carried by a packet switch network. IP address spoofing. This constructs an IP packet that appears to originate from a valid address inside the corporate intranet. Password-based attacks. These use stolen valid accounts to obtain lists of other users and network information. Denial of service attacks. These prevent normal use of a computer or network by valid users. Man in the middle. These hackers position themselves between a source and destination to monitor, capture, and control communication without the individuals on either end knowing they're there. Compromised key. This is essentially gaining access to a secured communication by obtaining the secret encryption key. And a sniffer. This is an application or device that can read, monitor, and capture network data. What are the common threats and attacks? What are the types of malware? The term malware is actually short for malicious software or malicious code. It's specifically designed to damage, disrupt, steal, or inflict illegitimate action on data hosts or networks. What are viruses? Viruses are a type of malware that propagates by inserting a copy of itself into another program. It's spread from one computer to another, infecting multiple computers on the network. It's often spread by USB memory drives, CDs, DVDs, network shares, and email. Viruses can lay dormant and activate at a specific time and date determined by the attacker. Viruses require human action to insert malicious code into another program. They execute a specific, often harmful function on a computer. And this is why we run antivirus software on our computers to avoid these viral infections. Trojan horses. This is a malicious code that's designed to look legitimate. It's often found attached to online games. and it is a non-replicating type of malware. It exploits the privileges of the user that runs the malware and can cause immediate damage, provide remote access to the system, or access to a system through a back door. Trojan horse classifications. There's several types of Trojan horses. The first is a remote access Trojan horse, which enables unauthorized remote access. A data sending Trojan horse, which provides the threat actor with sensitive data such as passwords. A destructive Trojan horse, which corrupts or deletes files. A proxy Trojan horse. This will use the victim's computer as the source device to launch attacks and perform other illegal activities. An FTP Trojan horse. This enables unauthorized file transfer services on end devices. And security software disabler Trojan horse. This stops antivirus programs or firewalls from even functioning. And then a denial of service Trojan horse, or a DOS Trojan horse, slows or halts network activity altogether. Worms. A worm executes arbitrary code and installs itself in the memory of the infected device. It automatically replicates itself and spreads across the network from system to system. Components of a worm attack include an exploiting vulnerability, delivering a malicious payload, and self-propagation. Unlike viruses, however, worms can run by themselves without any human intervention. And just as an example, in the left corner of your screen, the code red worm was launched against 658 servers across the world in 2001. 19 hours later, 300,000 servers were infected. A worm has several components, and a worm attack consists of enabling vulnerability, and basically a worm installs itself using an exploit mechanism such as an email attachment or an executable file or a Trojan horse on a vulnerable system. A propagation mechanism. After gaining access to a device, the worm replicates itself and locates new targets. And finally, payload. Any malicious code that results in some action is a payload, which is used to create a backdoor that allows a threat actor access to the infected host or to create a DOS, denial of service attack. As an example of a worm, the WannaCry ransomware attack was a May 2017 worldwide cyber attack by the WannaCry ransom crypto worm. It targeted computers running the Microsoft Windows operating system by encrypting data and demanding ransom payments in Bitcoin cryptocurrency. What is ransomware? Ransomware is malware that denies access to the infected computer or its data. Cybercriminals demand payment to release the computer system. Frequently, ransomware uses an encryption algorithm to encrypt system files and data and cannot be decrypted. Email and malicious advertising are vectors for ransomware campaigns. And social engineering is also used. As an example, would-be criminals who identify themselves as security technicians may call a person's home and persuade the user to connect to a website that downloads the ransomware to the user's computer. This node is a example of a screen capture of a computer that's been encrypted with ransomware. The next step in this process would be to send the threat actors money in the form of Bitcoin to unlock your files. But typically, even if you send the money, you're not going to get your files unlocked. And security officials always advise against sending currency to unlock your files. Other malware. Other malware includes spyware, which is used to gather information about a user and send the information to another entity without the user's consent. It can be a system monitor, Trojan horse, adware, tracking cookies, or keyloggers. Adware typically displays annoying pop-ups to generate revenue for its author. It may analyze user interest by tracking the websites visited and send pop-up advertising pertinent to those sites. Scareware, on the other hand, includes scam software which uses social engineering to shock or induce anxiety by creating the perception of a threat. It attempts to persuade the user to infect their computer by taking action to access that threat. An example may include a pop-up that notifies the user they are being monitored by the FBI because they have visited illegal websites and they must pay an online fine or be arrested. So it gives you a link to click to send them money so that you won't be arrested. Phishing attempts are attempts to convince people to divulge sensitive information. Examples may include receiving an email from their bank asking users to divulge their account and PIN numbers. And finally, rootkits. These are installed on a compromised system, and after it's installed, it continues to hide its intrusion and provide privileged access to the threat actor. Common malware behaviors. How do I know if my computer has been infected? Well, computers infected with malware often exhibit one or more of the following: appearance of strange files, programs, or desktop icons, antivirus and firewall programs that are turning off or the settings have been reconfigured. The computer screen is freezing or system is crashing. Emails are spontaneously being sent without your knowledge to your contact list. Files that have been modified or deleted on your computer. Increased CPU and/or memory usage. An example includes threat actors using your computer to mine cryptocurrency without your knowledge in the background. Problems connecting to networks. Slow computer or web browser speeds. Unknown processes or services running on your computer. And connections which are made to hosts on the internet without user action. And just overall strange computer behavior. So how can you secure your computer? You've probably heard all these before, but it's always a good idea just to go over things as a reminder. The tips on securing your computer include using a firewall. The first thing you do, make sure your firewall is enabled on your computer before you access the internet. Hardware firewalls can be purchased from companies like Cisco, Fortinet, Sophos. If you have a larger business, you can purchase business network firewalls as well. Make sure to install antivirus software. Computer viruses, keyloggers, and Trojans are everywhere. So make sure you have a good antivirus on your computer. Something like Bitdefender, Malwarebytes, or Avast are good options. Install an anti-spyware package. This is often included in major antivirus packages like WebRoot, McAfee, and Norton. Use complex passwords. I can't stress this enough. Using secure passwords is the most important way to prevent illegal intrusions. The more secure your password, the harder it is for a hacker to invade your system. Use at least 8 to 10 characters and a combination of numbers, upper and lowercase letters, and computer symbols. Keep your operating system, apps, and browser up to date. This is another topic that is extremely important. Always install new updates on your operating system and apps. Updates include security fixes that prevent hackers from accessing and exploiting your data. Ignore spam altogether. Beware of emails from unknown parties and never click on links or open attachments that accompany them. Back up your computer. If your business is not already backing up your hard drive, then they should be. Backing up your information is critical in case hackers get through and encrypt your system. And shut it down if not in use. If you're not operating a complex internet-based company, switch off your machine overnight or during long stretches of time when you're not working. Use virtualization software if you need to go to websites that you're not sure they are secure. Virtualization allows you to run your browser in a virtual environment like Parallels or VirtualBox that sidesteps your operating system to keep it safe. Linux Tails is another good operating system that you can use on your computer to visit sites that you're not sure are completely safe. Use two-factor authentication. Major online companies like Facebook, Google, Apple, and Microsoft let you enable two-factor authentication. and this hardens your account. Always use encryption. Even if someone is able to steal your data or monitor your internet connection, encryption can prevent hackers from accessing any of that information. BitLocker or File Vault can be good options for encryption. Types of network attacks. Attacks are typically classified in three major categories: reconnaissance, access, and denial of service. By categorizing network attacks, it is possible to address the types of attacks rather than individual attacks. Reconnaissance attacks. These are also known as information gathering reconnaissance attacks that perform unauthorized discovering and mapping of systems, services, and vulnerabilities. They're similar to a thief surveying a neighborhood by going door to door pretending to sell something. These recon attacks precede intrusive access attacks, or DOS attacks, and employ the use of widely available malware tools. As an example of a reconnaissance attack, first, the attacker performs an information query of a target. The threat actor is looking for initial information about a target, and they can use simple online tools such as Google Search, public information from DNS registries using various open source tools, including Dig, NSLookup, and Whois. The threat actor then initiates a ping sweep of the target networks and identifies which IP addresses are active. The threat actor also initiates port scans on hosts identified by the ping sweep to determine which ports or services are available. Access attacks. Access attacks exploit vulnerabilities in authentication services, FTP services, and web services to retrieve data, gain access to systems, or escalate access privileges. There are at least three reasons that the threat actors would use access attacks on networks or systems. This is first is to retrieve data, second, to gain access to the systems, and third, to escalate access privileges. Types of access attacks. There are 6 types. Password attack. Threat actors attempt to discover critical system passwords using phishing attacks, dictionary attacks, brute force attacks, network sniffing, or social engineering techniques. Hash attacks. Attackers gain access to the user's machine and use malware to access the stored password hashes. Typically, in a Windows operating system, the passwords are stored in hash value, which is an output of a hashing algorithm like MD5 or SHA. Trust exploitation. Hackers use a trusted host to gain access to network resources. Port redirection. They use a compromised system as a base for attacks against other targets. Man-in-the-middle attacks. Threat actors are positioned in between 2 legitimate entities in order to read, modify, or redirect the data that passes between the 2 parties. And finally, IP, MAC, and DHCP spoofing. One device essentially attempts to pose as another by falsifying address data. Social engineering attacks. These are probably the most vulnerable in today's atmosphere. This is an attack that attempts to manipulate individuals into performing actions or divulging confidential information needed to access a network. Examples of these social engineering attacks include pretexting. An attacker calls an individual and lies to them in an attempt to gain access to privileged data. Spam. We all know spam. The attacker uses spam email to trick a user into clicking an infected link or downloading an infected file. Phishing. The threat actor sends enticing custom-targeted spam email to individuals with malicious links. Something for something, or quid pro quo. The attacker requests personal information from a party in exchange for something, like a free gift. Tailgating. The attacker follows an authorized person with a corporate badge into a secure location. Visual hacking. The attacker physically observes the victim entering credentials such as a workstation login or an ATM PIN And this is also known as shoulder surfing. And finally, baiting. The threat actor leaves a malware-infected physical device, such as a CD disk, in a public location, such as a corporate break room. As an example, an individual walks into the break room and sees a CD lying on a counter with the words "Pictures from Vegas Trip" written across the front of it. They drop it into their disk drive to see who in the office went to Vegas, and bam, their computer is infected. Phishing attacks. This is a common social engineering technique that threat actors use to send emails that appear to be from a legitimate organization, such as a bank. Variations include spear phishing, targeted phishing attacks tailored for a specific individual or organization, whaling, similar to a spear phishing, but is focused on big targets such as top executives of an organization, such as a CEO. Watering hole attack. The attacker determines websites that the target group visits regularly and attempts to compromise those websites by infecting them with malware. So when the individuals visit the website, they download the malware, and now the individual is inside the corporate network. Vishing. This is phishing attack using voice and phone system instead of email. And smishing. This is a phishing attack used SMS texting instead of email. So this is an example of a spear phishing attack, and you probably have all heard about this. This was on the news back in 2016. The personal Gmail of John Podesta, a former White House chief of staff, was compromised in a data breach via a spear phishing attack. Experts believe the Russian cyber group named Fancy Bear, which is a unit of the Russian military intelligence agency, launched the attack. Mr. Podesta used a Gmail account like we all do, to handle all of his email. This email account had approximately 10 years of business and personal messages on it. This is a actual screenshot of the actual spear phishing email that John Podesta received. It says, "Someone just used your password to try to sign into Google account, and Google was able to stop the sign-in attempt. You should change your password immediately," and it gave him a malicious change password link. It was not a Google link, but a shortened bit.ly link. John Podesta's administrative assistant sent the email to the IT department because it was suspected of being fake. An IT employee sent a response that the Google email was legitimate, but later said he meant to write illegitimate. Mr. Podesta was told he needed to change his password immediately and initiate two-factor authentication at google.com. But instead of going to google.com, Mr. Podesta went back to his original email and clicked the link that was provided by the hackers, which immediately unlocked 10 years of his emails. All of those emails were later made available on WikiLeaks. So strengthening the weakest links. From the prior example, we've seen that people are typically the weakest link in cybersecurity. This is why social engineering attacks are so successful. Organizations must actively train their personnel and create a security-aware culture. Denial of service attacks, a DOS attack or a DDoS attack. These typically result in some sort of interruption of service to users, devices, or applications. They can be caused by overwhelming a target device with a large quantity of traffic or by using incorrectly formatted packets. A threat actor forwards packets containing errors that cannot be identified by the application or forwards improperly formatted packets. This is an example of a distributed DOS attack. 1. The threat actor builds or purchases a botnet of zombie hosts on the darknet. 2. The zombie computers continue to scan and infect more targets to create more zombies across the internet. When the botmaster is ready, he uses the handler systems to make the botnet zombies carry out the distributed DOS attack on the chosen target. And the target systems are overwhelmed, causing an interruption in service. And just think of this, organizations such as Amazon.com, they do millions of dollars a day in retail sales and purchases. If a DDoS attack was able to take down their system, even for a few hours, it could cause millions of dollars in damages. Buffer overflow attacks. The goal of this is to find a system memory related flaw on a server and exploit it. Exploiting the buffer memory by overwhelming it with unexpected values usually renders the system inoperable. As an example, a threat actor enters input into a data field that is larger than expected by the application running on a server. The data field may be something like a username input data field or a password data field. The application accepts the large amount of input and stores it in memory. It consumes the memory buffer and potentially overwrites adjacent memory, which eventually corrupts the system and causes it to crash. Evasion methods. Threat actors learned long ago that malware and attack methods are most effective when they're undetected. New attack and evasion methods are constantly being developed. Therefore, network security personnel must be aware of the latest attack methods in order to detect them. This is an example of TrickBot Ryuk cyber attack. This attack is currently going on throughout the world, and it's basically been an uptick since September and October of 2019. So there's currently an increase in TrickBot infections that lead to a Ryuk infection. For example, TrickBot disables the organization's endpoint antivirus application and spreads throughout the network, infecting hundreds of endpoints. Since TrickBot is a banking Trojan, it likely harvested and exfiltrated financial and other sensitive information prior to deploying the Ryuk ransomware. Typically, an employee clicks on an attachment in an email that unleashes the malware into their network. So let's start on the left side of the page and work our way to the right. TrickBot malware arrives via an email, often with malicious macro-enabled documents, such as a Word document or an Excel file, and it's downloaded. Someone clicks it, and it's downloaded into the system. TrickBot malware uses various modules to saturate the network. Sensitive data is funneled out of the network to the attacker's servers. TrickBot drops Ryuk onto the network, and the cyber threat actors deploy Ryuk network-wide using PowerShell and other software. The cyber threat attackers, or the CTAs, establish persistence and manually delete backups and shadow copies throughout the network. Many times, the attackers that are able to get into a network may stay in that network for a month or two, 30 to 60 days. Once they've taken all the information they want and they've copied all the files and stolen all the financial information, then they drop Ryuk, which encrypts all the systems on the network and creates a ransom note like we saw earlier. Then the individual is stuck without their network, without their data, which has already probably been exposed to different sites throughout the dark web. So how do we protect our systems? Endpoint security and analysis. Endpoint security, we have two internal local area network elements to secure. Endpoints, which are hosts, commonly consist of laptops, desktops, printers, servers, and IP phones, and network infrastructure. This is LAN infrastructure devices, interconnected endpoints, and typically include switches, wireless device, and IP devices. Host-based malware protection. Anti-malware and antivirus software. It's typically signature-based, which recognizes characteristics of known malware files, or heuristics-based. It recognizes general features shared by various types of malware. It can also be behavior-based or AI-based. It employs analysis of suspicious behavior. Host-based firewalls restrict incoming and outgoing connections. and host-based security suites, which include antivirus and anti-phishing, safe browsing, host-based intrusion prevention systems, firewall capabilities, and robust logging functionalities. Network-based malware protection. Network-based malware protection can include Advanced Malware Protection, or AMP, Email Security Appliance, or ESA, Web Security Appliances, or WSA, and Network Admission Control, or NAC. Host-based firewalls. Host-based personal firewalls are standalone software programs that control traffic entering or leaving a computer. And host-based firewall may include a Windows firewall, which uses a profile-based approach to configuring firewall functionality. In Linux systems, we use IP tables, which allows administrators to configure network access rules. NF tables. This is a successor to IP tables. NF tables is a Linux firewall application that uses a simple virtual machine in the Linux kernel, and TCP wrapper for Linux-based devices. These are rule-based access control and logging systems. So what is a host-based intrusion detection system? A host-based intrusion detection system, or a HIDS, protects hosts against malware and can perform monitoring and reporting, log analysis, event correlation, integrity checking, policy enforcement, and rootkit detection. HIDS software must run directly on the host, so it is considered an agent-based system. A HIDS not only detects malware, but can also prevent it from executing if it should reach the host. How does a HIDS operate? An additional set of strategies are used to detect malware that evades signature detection. These are anomaly-based, basically host behavior is compared to a learned baseline model, and policy-based. Normal behavior is described by rules or by the violation of rules. In addition, some malware families exhibit polymorphism. This means the malware has the ability to change its signature just enough to not be detected by the intrusion detection systems. What is an attack surface? We hear this term thrown around a lot. An attack surface is the total sum of vulnerabilities. These include open ports, application, wireless connections, and users. Attack surfaces are currently expanding due to cloud-based systems, mobile devices, BYOD, or bring your own device, and the IoT, or the Internet of Things. These are chips which are placed in everything we use in our modern world, including cars, refrigerators, washing machines. The SANS Institute describes three components of an attack surface as a network attack surface, a software attack surface, and a human attack surface. Systems also use application blacklisting and whitelisting. Application blacklists, which are not permitted, application whitelist, which apps are allowed to run, and websites can also be whitelisted and blacklisted. Cisco's Firesight security management system is an example of a device that can access the Cisco Talos Security Intelligence Service to obtain blacklists for your system. System-based sandboxing. Sandboxing is a technique that allows suspicious files to be analyzed and run in a safe environment. A number of online public sandboxes exist. These services allow malware samples to be uploaded for analysis. An example of these services are VirusTotal and Hybrid Analysis. So if you do have files that you would like to run in these systems, you can go ahead and upload them. There's no cost. Or you can also investigate URLs to see if it's a malicious URL. Endpoint vulnerability assessments. Network profiling is used by many corporations to create a baseline to compare against when an attack occurs. Elements of a network baseline should include session duration, total throughput, critical asset, address space, and typical traffic type. And the main thing to remember about network profiling is networks have a rhythm or behavior. Anything outside of that rhythm may be suspicious and should be investigated. Network anomaly detection. Network behavior is described by a large amount of diverse data, such as the features of packet flow, features of packets themselves, and telemetry from multiple sources. Big data analytics techniques can be used to analyze this data and detect variations from the baseline. Anomaly detection can recognize network congestion caused by worm traffic and also identify infected hosts on the network. Network vulnerability testing. Network vulnerability testing can include risk analysis, vulnerability assessment, and penetration testing, such as mentioned earlier in the presentation. Vulnerability information sources. There are 3 common vulnerability information sources. The Common Vulnerability Scoring System, or the CVSS, is a risk assessment designed to convey the common attributes and severity of vulnerabilities in computer hardware and software systems. The Common Vulnerabilities and Exposure, or the CVE, is a dictionary of common names in the form of CVE identifiers for known cybersecurity vulnerabilities. And the National Vulnerability Database. This utilizes CVE identifiers and supplies additional information such as CVSS threat scores. Compliance regulations. There are many U.S. regulations that impact cybersecurity, and they are to prevent security breaches. A number of security compliance regulations have been developed and are continually being developed. Risk management. Risk management involves the selection of security controls for an organization. It consists of risk avoidance, which is stop performing the activities that create risk. Risk reduction, take measures to reduce vulnerabilities. Risk sharing, shift some of the risk to other parties. And risk retention, accept the risk and its consequences. Vulnerability management. Vulnerability management is a security practice designed to proactively prevent the exploitation of IT vulnerabilities. Enterprise patch management. We've all heard of making sure your software is updated and is patched. Well, enterprise patch management involves all aspects of software patching, including identifying required patches, acquiring, distributing, installing, and verifying that the patch is installed on all systems. Many large corporate networks have enterprise patch management systems. Security management systems. These are management framework that's used to identify, analyze, and address information security risks. And finally, Vince had mentioned earlier in his presentation, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. The NIST Cybersecurity Framework is a set of standards designed to integrate existing standards, guidelines, and practices to help better manage and reduce cybersecurity risk. And it has 5 core functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Thank you, and that concludes this overview of cybersecurity. If you enjoyed this presentation, you may want to take Cisco's Cybersecurity Ops Security course or CompTIA's Security Plus course. And both of these courses delve very deep into all of these topics. All right.
Thanks, Cort, so much.
Oh yeah. No.
Let's see. Let's see if we can maybe address Eric's question that he typed in a little while back. He's asking, what do you think is the best start would be for a small business to apply when they're not security experts or have any interest in it? How do we make security easy to adopt and understand both from value and adoption? I don't know if maybe if Cort or maybe you, Vince, want to take this one.
I mean, I can take a first crack at it, and my priorities there is, if you remember this, look back the slides for the CIS controls, things were phased in a way to help prioritize things. So the smaller organizations focus more on those basic controls, for example, and then as the organization is larger or matures and improves the adoption, then focus on the larger priorities. You got to start somewhere, and so start with the basics and be rugged there.
And your IT administrator may want to take like a security plus TIA, CompTIA Security Plus course, or just refresh their education of the attacks that are out there, because they're always changing. And then they could use that knowledge to better prepare their systems and look at devices and software and hardware that may also protect their systems.
If you don't mind me adding a comment here, is it's really important for the smaller businesses to continually communicate to their employees. Since one of the weakest links is the employee, I'm constantly sending out security messages or forwarding ones of warnings to my people about the latest things that people are trying to do on a social engineering level.
Absolutely. And like we said earlier, the personnel is your weakest link typically, because even though you have the best firewall protection and you have your software tweaked and patches applied, all it takes is one individual to click on the wrong link and you have an intruder inside your network.
And then a second question for you two. What security issues and strategies should participants of the HACC plan for and or implement within their application solutions? And are there anything, strategies of securing data that we need to take into account if we're creating an application for the HACC event?
I'll take a first crack at that. I think my last slide or two referred to the OWASP model. That's a top 10 list highlighting the common vulnerabilities that are addressed. So if you're writing an application, keep those things in mind. Well, the key point being input validation and output encoding. That means make sure that there's no evil or nefarious way for somebody to provide malicious data when processes go form. And then when you're outputting data, format in a way so that it does not spit out JavaScript that can be active and take advantage of the user.
And the next question was, nice, aloha Cort, nice summary. Is there a link to your slides available? And I will answer that as, yes, there will be a link to the slides available. There isn't one right at the moment, but there will be one as soon as I get all the data, okay?
Right, and we're going to also try to have the video available too as well, is that correct?
Yes, correct. The recording of this event will be hosted somewhere as well.
Great.
Somewhere privately on the HACC event is basically the HACC website. Excuse me. Any other questions? Vince or Cort, do you have any last minute great insights to share with our potential HACC participants? I know that's a little bit vague, but you know, if you had one thing that you thought that they should walk away with to help them with their HACC event, what would that be? So what if each of you could make one comment, I'd appreciate that. Sorry.
Yeah. I have a comment just in the situation that the world finds ourselves in with this coronavirus. You see so many jobs being lost throughout the world, but one job, one employers that are always looking for individuals, even during this drastic situation we're in, is the IT employers. So if you are out there and you enjoy doing the hackathons and you enjoy as a hobby playing around with IT stuff and software, I just wholeheartedly encourage you to get some certifications, move forward, get into the field, because you can move up very quickly. There are so many, if you just do a Google search of how many openings there are out there for IT related positions, it's just astronomical. And the field is just getting bigger and better. And so if it's something that you really enjoy doing, I would move forward, because the opportunity window is open.
Right, and just to volunteer my perspective, when participating in the HACC program, don't be afraid to iterate. You know, fail early, fail often. Don't be afraid to try different things, and when you've confirmed that it doesn't work, then pivot and then try again. Try different angles. There's a lot of things you can do to get a more robust environment for you folks. If you're writing an application, for example, let's say you're using GitHub to store your software code repository. Do what you can to protect your code repo. Turn on MFA, multi-factor authentication, when you log in for GitHub. That way a bad actor can abuse and take over your account and have access to the source code, or steal, modify the source code, for example. Your email addresses that you're using for GitHub authentication, and lock those down on the MFA side. And as far as code reviews go, there's some free tools out there to do software security assessments, either dynamic or static analysis against your code base, whatever language you may be using. I'm going to guess for the application developers, it's going to be something like an Android development environment or an iPhone environment or something JavaScript. So there's it's hit or miss, but you try lots of different frameworks to do those scans and get more comfortable with it. Right. Thank you.